Yes, ma'am. Just moved in last month. Beautiful neighborhood. And in your opinion, should community leaders be held accountable for maintaining standards, even if those standards are occasionally challenging to enforce? The jogger shifted awkwardly. I guess. I mean, I don't really know much about HOA stuff. I just pay my dues and try to keep my lawn green. Exactly. Karen's voice cracked with vindication. You understand the basic social contract. You contribute, you maintain standards, you respect the system. But what happens when people decide they don't want standards anymore? What happens when they want to tear down everything good just because it requires effort? The jogger was definitely looking uncomfortable now. Maybe you should talk to someone about. They want to remove me from office, Karen continued, her voice gaining momentum. These people who've benefited from everything I've built. Property values up 30% under my leadership, crime down to virtually zero. Every lawn perfectly maintained, every house contributing to neighborhood aesthetic harmony. And they want to throw it all away because I asked them to follow rules. She looked at the pond, then back at the jogger. Do you know what happens to communities without proper leadership? Ma'am, I really think you should. Karen put the truck in drive. The jogger stepped back quickly as she rolled forward, slowly, deliberately, until the front wheels hit the muddy bank. The truck tilted slightly downward. Ma'am, what are you doing? Giving them exactly what they asked for. Karen called out the window. No more HOA truck. No more community resources. No more Karen Whitmore cleaning up everyone else's problems. She pressed the accelerator. The truck slid into the pond with surprising grace, like a boat launching in reverse. Karen had approximately 30 seconds before the water reached the windows, and she used every one of them to savor the perfect symbolism of the moment. Water gurgled around the tires, then the bumper, then halfway up the doors. The engine sputtered and died with what sounded almost like a sigh of relief. Karen rolled down both windows and climbed out onto the roof as the truck settled deeper into the pond, sending ripples toward the far shore where Blue Heron watched with aristocratic disapproval. Lady, are you completely insane? The jogger was now standing knee-deep in pond water, apparently having decided that rescuing crazy HOA presidents was somehow his responsibility. Probably, Karen admitted, surprisingly calm now that the deed was done. But insanity is subjective. Some people might call 8 years of unpaid community service insane. Others might call it dedication. Her phone rang. Margaret Chen's name appeared on the screen. Karen, where are you? The meeting starts in an hour, and we need to discuss. Margaret's voice cut off as she apparently processed what she was hearing. Why do I hear water? And why is there a crowd gathering at Willow Pond? Karen looked around. The jogger had been joined by several other early risers, including Mrs. Patterson from Elm Street, the same Mrs. Patterson whose inappropriate garden gnomes Karen had cited for violation of decorative lawn ornament guidelines. I'm providing the community with a valuable lesson about the consequences of poor decision-making, Karen said into the phone. Karen, people are posting videos on the neighborhood Facebook page. Did you really drive the HOA truck into the pond? The truck was community property. The community wanted new leadership. New leadership means new decisions about resource allocation. Margaret's voice shifted from annoyed to genuinely concerned. Karen, this isn't like you. Talk to me. What's really going on? Karen sat down on the truck's roof, her feet dangling in the water. The pond was deeper than she'd expected. The truck was now completely submerged except for the roof, which sat about 6 inches above the surface like a small, defeated island. You want to know what's really going on? Karen's voice was quieter now, almost thoughtful. I moved to Willowbrook 12 years ago because I wanted to live somewhere beautiful, somewhere that felt like a community. And I worked, God, Margaret, I worked so hard to make it that way. Every rule, every guideline, every fine I handed out was because I believed we could be better than just another subdivision where people ignore each other and let everything fall apart. Mrs. Patterson had waded closer and was now within earshot. Her expression was unreadable. But maybe, Karen continued, watching a fish swim past her submerged toes, maybe I forgot that communities aren't just about standards. Maybe they're about forgiveness, too. The crowd on the shore was growing. Karen could see Jimmy, the maintenance guy, arriving, proudly wondering where his truck had gone. Behind him, Margaret Chen was walking quickly down the path, still holding her phone. The recall election is still happening, Margaret said when she reached the water's edge. But Karen, we need to figure out how to fish a truck out of our pond first. Karen looked at the assembled neighbors, people she'd cited, argued with, lectured, and occasionally helped when they needed it. They weren't looking at her with the anger she'd expected. Instead, they looked confused, concerned, and maybe a little impressed by the sheer audacity of what she'd done. I'll pay for the truck, Karen said, though she had no idea how. And the pond cleanup, and whatever damage I've caused to the ecosystem. We'll figure it out, Margaret said, surprising everyone including herself. But Karen, you need help. Real help. This isn't about HOA politics anymore. Karen nodded slowly. She'd crossed a line today, several lines actually, and there would be consequences. The recall election would happen. She might face legal issues. Her carefully constructed reputation as the reliable, if difficult, community leader was probably destroyed. But as she sat on the roof of the submerged truck, surrounded by neighbors she'd spent years trying to perfect, Karen felt something she hadn't experienced in months: relief. The question was what would happen next, because sinking a truck was easy compared to the hard work of rebuilding trust with an entire community. And somewhere in the crowd gathering at the pond's edge, Karen was pretty sure she spotted a reporter with a camera, which meant this story was about to get much, much bigger than Willowbrook. She closed her eyes and listened to the gentle lapping of water against the truck roof, wondering if redemption was possible for someone who'd spent so long believing that perfection was the only acceptable goal. Karen Whitmore stood ankle-deep in muddy pond water at 6:47 am, watching the HOA's brand-new $45,000 maintenance truck disappear beneath the surface with nothing but bubbles and her own reflection staring back at her. The WLODBROKHOA, serving the CONMINUNIT, decal on the driver's side door, was the last thing to vanish into the murky depths. Well, that's one way to make a statement, she muttered, wringing pond scum from her designer blazer. It had started 3 hours earlier when Karen arrived at the community center to find that woman Margaret Chen setting up folding chairs in the wrong pattern. Not the regulation semicircle outlined in Section 4.21 of the HOA handbook, but some chaotic arrangement that looked like. Karen shuddered. Creativity. Margaret, what exactly do you think you're doing? Karen's voice could have cut glass. Margaret didn't even look up from adjusting a chair. Setting up for the meeting. You know, the one where we vote on whether to keep you as HOA president? Karen's eye twitched. The recall petition. Those ungrateful residents had actually gathered enough signatures to challenge her authority. Her, the woman who had single-handedly raised their property values by implementing a 17-page landscaping compliance guide. Those chairs are completely wrong. The manual clearly states. Karen, nobody cares about your manual. Margaret finally turned around, her expression maddeningly calm. Half the neighborhood can't afford the fines you've been handing out like Halloween candy. Mrs. Peterson is selling her house because you cited her for having the wrong shade of beige shutters. Desert sand, not Sahara cream. The difference is obvious to anyone with functioning eyes. Margaret laughed, actually laughed, and that sound triggered something primal in Karen's chest. A hot, pulsing fury that demanded immediate action. You know what? Fine. If you people want to live like animals, I'll show you what happens when leadership disappears. Karen spun on her sensible beige heel and marched toward the door. Enjoy your little meeting. I'll be in my office handling real community business. But Karen didn't go to her office. Instead, she stood in the parking lot, seething, watching Margaret through the window as she continued her chair rebellion. The HOA truck sat nearby, keys dangling from the ignition because their maintenance guy, Jimmy, always forgot them. An idea formed. Terrible, brilliant, and absolutely necessary. Karen had built this community from nothing. She'd fought City Hall for better street lighting, negotiated with contractors to fix the drainage issues, And yes, she'd enforced standards that kept Willowbrook from becoming another suburban wasteland. And this was how they repaid her. She climbed into the truck, her hands shaking with righteous indignation. If they wanted to remove her from power, they'd learn exactly what happened when good leadership vanished. Starting with their precious community resources. The truck started with a rumble that felt like destiny. 20 minutes later, Karen sat in the truck at the edge of Willow Pond, engine idling, watching a family of ducks paddle peacefully across the water. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in soft pastels that reminded her of the color palette she'd spent 3 months developing for approved mailbox designs. Her phone buzzed. Another text from her daughter Ashley. "Mom, heard about the meeting. Maybe it's time to step back. You've been HOA president for 8 years. Take a vacation." 8 years. Karen thought about everything she'd accomplished in those 8 years. The community garden that nobody appreciated because she'd insisted on native plants only. The architectural review committee that prevented tacky additions. The noise ordinance that kept teenage parties from disturbing the peace. And what did she get for it? A recall election, and Margaret Chen rearranging furniture like some sort of anarchist. Another text from Ashley. "Dad says you haven't been returning his calls. He's worried about you." David, her ex-husband who'd accused her of being too controlling during the divorce proceedings. The man who couldn't understand that standards weren't suggestions, they were the foundation of civilized society. He'd moved to a condo downtown where people kept pets over the weight limit and painted their front doors whatever color struck their fancy. "Ma'am? You okay in there?" Karen jumped. A jogger had appeared beside the driver's window, young, probably in his 20s, wearing shorts that definitely violated the community's athletic wear guidelines for public spaces. "I'm fine," she said through the glass. "Your truck's been idling here for a while." "Engine trouble." Karen studied his face. Clean-cut, concerned, the kind of young person who might actually appreciate proper community standards if given the chance. "Tell me something," she said, rolling down the window. "Do you live in Willowbrook?"